In 2018, the last surviving World War I veteran, a man named Harry, faced a shocking act of disrespect that would leave the entire country in disbelief. Harry, at 110 years old, was living quietly in his small home, having survived the horrors of the Great War. But one fateful afternoon, a group of bikers showed up, harassing and bullying him, mocking his service and age. What happened next would change everything. As Harry sat in shock, his hands trembling, he picked up the phone to make a call that would send shockwaves through the community. What he did next? No one saw it coming. Stay tuned as we unravel this incredible true story, a tale of courage, resilience, and a call that left everyone stunned. Harry had lived a life filled with both heroism and hardship. He enlisted at just 18, eager to serve his country during World War I, a time when the world was plunged into chaos. Over the years, he had seen things most people couldn't even imagine. As the last of his generation, Harry often found himself reminiscing about the friends he'd lost and the battles he'd fought. But now, in his twilight years, he wanted nothing more than peace. His small home in the countryside was his sanctuary. Then, without warning, the bikers arrived. It wasn't just a chance encounter. They had been circling for days, knowing exactly who Harry was. Their cruel mockery, the jeers about his age, about his service, were more than Harry could take. But his next move would change the course of the entire encounter. As the bikers revved their engines outside, Harry felt a wave of frustration wash over him. These weren't just strangers. They were a group of local men, some of whom had known his family for years. Yet here they were, laughing as they threw insults at the frail veteran. Harry's hands shook, but it wasn't just from age. It was a deep, simmering anger. He had fought for this country, for their freedom, and yet he was being mocked, humiliated in his own home. The bikers, with their loud, reckless attitude, represented everything Harry had fought against: disrespect, violence, and unchecked cruelty. Among the group, there was one man who stood out, a younger biker, maybe in his 20s, who seemed less engaged in the mockery. His face was hardened, but Harry could see a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. It was as if he was unsure of the path his friends had chosen. Harry could almost sense that the young man was wrestling with his conscience, but the group was pushing him forward, egging him on. The tension grew thick. Harry couldn't just sit back anymore. He needed to do something, but what? Should he call the police? What if that only made things worse? And then, with an almost imperceptible sigh, he grabbed the phone. His fingers moved slowly, but with purpose, as he dialed a number he hadn't thought about in years. The person on the other end of the line had a reputation for dealing with situations like this, and Harry hoped, prayed, that they would be able to help. But would they get there in time? Or would the bikers cross a line that no one could undo? The sound of the bikers' laughter echoed through Harry's ears, blending with the revving engines that rattled the windows of his small house. His heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the weight of years, decades, bearing down on him. And yet, in that moment, it was as if the war had never ended. The same forces of cruelty and violence were closing in. The young biker's eyes were still on him, but now there was something darker in them, a dangerous curiosity. Harry's grip tightened on the phone. The number he dialed was one he'd hoped never to use again. He had made a pact with himself long ago to keep the past buried, but this was different. This was not just about remembering the horrors of war. It was about standing up, showing the world that respect had a price, and that there were still people willing to pay it. As the phone rang, the bikers grew louder, surrounding his property. Harry could hear their taunts grow sharper, more personal. "What are you gonna do, old man?" One of them shouted. "Call for help. We're not scared of you. Not anymore." The others laughed, and Harry felt the last shred of his patience snap. His thumb hovered over the phone, his finger trembling. Then, just as the line clicked, a voice on the other end answered. It was deep, calm, and unmistakable. "Harry, what's going on?" Before Harry could speak, he heard something he hadn't expected. The roar of motorcycles pulling up. The bikers weren't just threatening anymore. They were about to make their move. Harry could sense the shift in the air. Every nerve in his body was on high alert, but the voice on the phone didn't panic. "Stay calm," the voice instructed. "We're on our way. Just keep them there, Harry. You've got this." Harry took a deep breath, his heart still racing. The bikers were closing in on the front door now, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. "This ends tonight," he muttered to himself, as his eyes locked with the young biker, who seemed to be waiting for something. What exactly, Harry couldn't tell, but one thing was certain. The next few moments would determine everything. Would the bikers back down, or would they push too far? As the door creaked open, Harry braced himself. His hand shook with tension, but there was a resolve in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The bikers, sensing the change, seemed to tighten their circle. The young man at the front now stood close enough that Harry could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the flicker of doubt. But before he could act on it, a sharp voice cut through the air. Enough. It was a voice Harry hadn't heard in decades. A voice he never expected to hear again. From behind the group of bikers, a figure emerged, a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a leather jacket. His face was familiar, though Harry could barely believe it. It was Jack, a man who had fought alongside him in the trenches of World War I. They had lost touch after the war, each carrying their own scars, but Harry recognized him immediately. Jack had disappeared years ago, leaving only whispers in the community. But now, here he was, standing in front of Harry, his presence shifting the balance of power in the most unexpected way. The bikers froze, unsure of how to respond. Jack didn't need to explain. His reputation alone sent a chill through the group. He had the same cold, intense demeanor that Harry remembered, but now there was something darker in his eyes. His voice, when he spoke again, was low but firm. "You think you can just walk into a man's house and mock him? You're not dealing with a regular old vet here. You're dealing with someone who's seen things that'll haunt you for the rest of your life." The bikers shifted nervously, glancing at each other. But it was clear. Jack had a power over them that Harry hadn't expected. What was Jack doing here? Why had he appeared now, of all times? Before anyone could make another move, Jack raised his hand. "Back off," he ordered, his voice steady, unyielding. The bikers didn't move, but there was hesitation now, genuine fear. The young man, the one who had been on the fence, looked at Jack with wide eyes, his hands trembling as if unsure whether to follow his old friend's orders. But then something even more unsettling happened. Jack turned to Harry, his eyes narrowing as if he was sizing him up. The silence between them hung thick. There was an air of something unsaid between the two men, an old grudge, an unresolved tension. Harry had fought beside Jack in the trenches, but he knew better than anyone that sometimes you don't really know a man until you've been through war together. And Harry had a feeling that Jack's return wasn't just about protecting him. It was about something much deeper. The bikers were on edge, and so was Harry. The unexpected arrival of Jack had shifted the game entirely, but now Harry was faced with a new question. Could he trust the man who had once been his brother in arms? Or was Jack here to settle a score of his own, one that had nothing to do with the bikers at all? The standoff seemed to stretch on forever, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. The bikers, caught between the arrival of Jack and their growing unease, stood frozen. Harry, his eyes locked with Jack's, could feel his pulse quicken. Was Jack here to help? Or had something darker been lurking beneath his unexpected return? For a long moment, neither man moved. The only sound was the distant hum of the motorcycles still idling outside. The young biker, clearly rattled, took a step back, but his friends remained stubbornly defiant, not yet willing to leave. Jack took a slow, deliberate step. It was the young biker, the one who had seemed so uncertain earlier. But now his face was filled with determination. He wasn't just another local troublemaker. He was an undercover cop, sent to infiltrate the biker gang. Harry had no idea, but Jack did. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Jack hadn't just come to settle an old score. He had known about the biker gang's illegal activities for years, and his return wasn't about nostalgia. It was to protect Harry and bring justice to the gang that had terrorized the town for far too long. The gang members, now trapped between the sheriff's team and their own internal conflict, realized they were out of options. They began to disperse, some trying to flee, others too shocked to act. The young undercover cop made his move, quickly apprehending one of the leaders. Harry stood there, breathless, as the chaos unfolded around him. Jack approached Harry, his face softening for the first time since he'd arrived. "You don't have to worry anymore, Harry," he said quietly. "They're done. I couldn't let them keep pushing you around." Harry looked at Jack, a mix of gratitude and confusion in his eyes. I never knew it was you all along." Jack gave a small, almost sad smile. "There's a lot you don't know, old friend." And just as the last of the bikers were taken into custody, another twist hit. The sheriff, walking over to Harry, handed him an envelope. "This was left at your door this morning," he said. Harry opened it slowly, and his eyes widened in shock. It was a letter from the president, thanking him for his service during the war and informing him that he was being awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. The timing of the letter was no coincidence. Someone in high places had been watching, and they had been waiting for the right moment to honor Harry. But as Harry read the letter, he realized something even more chilling. The letter was postmarked from a place he never expected. Jack's old